Joining me now on the cage is our analytics genius. I'm saying genius now. You've moved up to expert, now to genius, Keith, because you are a genius. Because I read your texts. They're quite brilliant. I wanted to touch on something that Dave Thomas and I were talking about earlier in the show, and that's the absurdity and how upset I get, and I live in Regina, I'm born and raised, when I hear, even on TSN, the Rough Riders called Regina instead of Saskatchewan. And, I mean, that's got to bother you. You're not from Regina. You have driven probably thousands of kilometers over your lifetime to drive to games at now Mosaic Stadium. How much does that irk you when you hear that Regina instead of Saskatchewan, as somebody that comes in from outside of Regina to games?
Yeah, I think, Don, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a definite 12 and a half. It really does irk me. And not just because it's, it fails to represent the provincial and regional impact that this team has. But I tip my cap to the fans in Regina. The majority of season ticket holders come from the city of Regina. But let's not discount the number of people like myself who can name every gopher along Highway 11 between Sask and Regina.
Yeah.
And let's face it, there are people who do the trip longer than me, people who come from North Battleford, Prince Albert, from parts of southeastern Saskatchewan. So it's we are Canada's team, A, but B, we are entrenched as Saskatchewan's team. It's a provincial entity. It's a provincial brand. It's something that unites this province together. So I clearly want us to represent the proper name of the franchise.
Yeah, and I know Dave Thomas was saying earlier that at the AGM, I believe it was at the AGM, that he was talking to the Rider president and CEO, Craig Reynolds, who said that this season, I believe he meant this season, 60% of all ticket sales for the Rough Rider games are outside of Regina, which is really impressive.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's something I didn't know. I would have thought that it would be the opposite, that you'd have the majority from Regina. That's actually a good sign. I'm not saying people are more committed if they travel a longer distance, but the fact remains for us in Saskatoon and Prince Albert, North Battleford, Meadow Lake, a Rider game is an all-day experience. Traveling either middle of the afternoon, later in the morning, coming back either the next day or later in the evening. So it's a fairly wonderful, courageous, but usually positive commitment for Rider fans.
Yeah, you bet. And hopefully there's a big crowd on Friday. I think there will be. They're up against Craven, of course, which is a pretty big event down here in southern Saskatchewan. But yeah, I'd expect a very good crowd for 3-1 Calgary and 4-0 Saskatchewan. And I just before we get into some of your analytics, I can't help but notice that really cool painting or picture right behind you. It looks like, is that the Ridgeway kick? I can't tell, but tell me about that painting. It's really cool looking.
Yeah, that's the artist is Bresciani. I'm forgetting his first name. It's not Rob Bresciani, but some artwork that he has done in a lot of different sports situations.
Oh, okay.
But years ago, he did. If you look at the picture, it sort of does the before, during, and after of November 26, 1989, the kick. Ridgeway from ready to get the snap from Poley, Suter holding it to the follow through. And obviously you can't see it, from your screen, but the fans pictured in the stands are actual Rider fans. Individuals could submit their own or family members to be included in there. And what's really cool here is my late father is pictured in there along with our son. When he was much younger. And so for my dad, who drove me from Melfort for games starting in the early 1970s, it's a wonderful way to pay homage to him, because absent his influence, I don't know if I'd be as connected to the Riders as I am, but because I think a lot of us in this province can swap stories of how moms and dads and aunties and uncles and grandparents made that trip for several hours coming down to Regina, and that's how we fell in love with the green and white.
In your opinion, going back through as long as we've been alive and as long as there's been video to see, I guess, in some respects, is that is that field goal the most famous play in Rough Rider history, or where would you put it? Is it number one? Because it seems to be to me, but I haven't thought about it until just now.
Yeah, obviously significant, Don. Remember, we hadn't won a Grey Cup in 23 seasons. So we had won the first Grey Cup in '66. We had the 11 straight years without making the playoffs in an 8 or 9 team league. We couldn't get out of our way for years. And in '89 and 9 and 19, the magic happens. I would put 2 other events to me in my mind that are quite high in that list. Number one was the 1963 Miracle at Taylor Field. I was not alive for that. My late father talked for years about people who were coming back streaming into the stadium when the Riders overcame a 35-9 deficit in the first game with a total point and won 39-12 in the second game and won the two-game series 48-47. The second game, and again, for a lot of fans, maybe it's not important for them, but for me it was August 18th, 2007. It was the blackout game when we beat Edmonton, when the power went out for over an hour, and 12,000 fans stayed after a pouring torrential downpour and stayed in the stands, watched the Riders come back, and that put us up to a 6-2 mark. 2 weeks later, we won in the Kerry Joseph quarterback draw against Winnipeg, went 7-2, and won the Grey Cup that season.
Well, I was like you. I stayed. I know you would have for sure. And it was sort of like when we came out and got back into our seats, I looked across the field at the other side of the stadium and the people to my left and right, and I thought, these are the diehards. These are the people. And the Riders, I think they sensed that and they wanted for them.
There are a couple times in the history of this franchise where I feel that the fan, whether it's the enthusiasm, the juice, the culture of the crowd, propelled the Riders to victory. That was a game the Riders were not going to lose. Yeah. I recall hearing interviews by both Edmonton and Saskatchewan players. They heard the 12,000 fans shouting, "Let's go Riders, let's go Riders," while they were getting dressed in the locker room. It came out, and it was, we were down by 5 before the break, came and scored 12 unanswered points and won 39-32 over Edmonton.
Wow, what a great memory. Well, let's go to some of your analytics. Of course, the Rough Riders are coming off a bye week, and that's the first, of course, Keith, of 3 byes for Saskatchewan this year. How did Saskatchewan fare compared to the rest of the CFL teams in terms of bye week distribution?
Excellent question, Don. Maybe this is our year that maybe we owe a holiday gift or some Rider merchandise to the schedule maker, because the schedule maker was really kind to the green and white. We've got our byes in weeks 5, 10, and 16. Again, I'm not in the boardroom or in the locker room to know what the team wants in terms of bye weeks, but to me, that's a wonderful distribution. You've got a steady rhythm and a steady cadence. You play 4 weeks, get a bye, play another 4 weeks, get a bye, play 5 weeks, get a bye. Unlike other seasons where we've had long stretches where we played maybe 10, 12 weeks in a row, this is conducive for the Riders because to me it will bring in some rhythm and some cadence to the whole team's composition.
Yeah, maybe Greg Reynolds, paid somebody off or something. I don't know. But having a good bye week is, if I recall, having some decent bye weeks is paid off at the end of a season, hasn't it? Like Winnipeg got the first one this year, and I thought, what a bad one. Like, you're not banged up yet. Go ahead, sorry.
It's a situation, again, if you look back through the past, that's been about 8 or 9 years where we've had teams getting 3 byes in a season. We've had some years where it's been pretty abysmal. This year, again, I'm happy with where we're at. Again, this is, I guess, the year that we were able to get the benefit as opposed to the burden of the bye week distribution.
Now, we had your good friend Jock Newman and my friend Jock Newman on SportsCage last week, and we were talking about how June isn't and doesn't appear to be a good month to draw football fans. The fans seem to be coming back a lot more in July. If you look at the situation, like the Prairie teams do well, obviously hosting Grey Cups. They wanted it moved up in Winnipeg because of possible weather problems. It's to be played on the 16th of November. And they've got the 3 byes. So I was saying to Jock, and Jock was making all very good points about this, and he was right about everything he said about June football. But I said, I don't really know what they can do. So whenever I don't really know what should happen or what can be done, I go to a smarter guy and ask him, which is you. So if you were like, running the schedule, how would you get around this problem?
Well, good question, Don. Three things I would do. Number one, I would start the season on July 1st or around there. To me, it's Canada Day. It has, I think, a natural connectivity for probably the only sports league that I know of that is purely Canadian. So I would do that. The benefit, by the way, of starting in July is that we avoid any crossover with the Stanley Cup or with the NBA championships. So to me, we'd start in July when we've got the sports sort of the agenda all to ourselves. I would go the season till the first Sunday in December. Again, I recognize you're rolling the dice with games later in the year, especially in the prairies. But let's look at the attendance we've had in Calgary and Edmonton. That's a sad look for the league when you've got probably 32 fans who attended the Calgary-Ottawa game. Edmonton not drawing that well. The other thing I would do, again, it would require some negotiation with the Players Association, but go down to 2 bye weeks. The NFL, again, a lot of us use the NFL as sort of the pinnacle of a sports league. Their teams have 1 bye week.
Yeah.
Could we not have 2 bye weeks and just, again, to shorten the schedule, to give us the chance of that July to December rotation? It avoids any June crossover. It enables us, in my mind, to get the maximum eyeballs and interest for the league.
Right. Well, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they tackle this going forward. It might be a big ask once you've given the players the 3 bye weeks. I guess we'll see what happened. Now, last year was the first year in forever that the East was better than the West as a division. Prior to that, it was always the West with a better division, but that didn't necessarily result in a Grey Cup championship. How are things going this year between the East and the West, Keith?
Yeah, the universe is unfolding as it should. I speak as a fan of Western Canada here in sort of the West Division. The West is 7-2 against the East thus far. The Riders, they went 3-0. We beat Ottawa, Hamilton, and Toronto. The only games the East has beaten the West. Ottawa beat Calgary in a monsoon, and then Montreal beat Edmonton. And so it's a situation to me where if I'm a Western Division team, I'm looking at that crossover. Again, I know it's hard to talk with the playoffs when we're early July, but if we just project to the end of the season, I'm thinking playoffs, 4th team in the West. I'd rather be 4th and 3rd because the 4th gets the crossover, and the 3rd place team would have to play 2 road games in Western Canada.
I agree totally. Now, the Riders, of course, off to a great start. 4-0. Your computer model projections, what are they for the Rough Riders over the course of this season? Where does the computer think they're going to end up?
Computer still has some Rider glasses on, still projecting the team to finish 14-4, still projecting us to finish first, to play Hamilton in the Grey Cup. But watch out for Calgary. Calgary, by virtue of we've had very few games thus far in the season, so we're dealing with a sparse amount of data. The model this past week skyrocketed Calgary from about 3% to about 23%. There's a probability of winning the Grey Cup. So welcome, Rider Nation, now to maybe the real start of the season, because we've got a gauntlet of games upcoming where, to me, there's no free spaces on the bingo card, especially Friday night. Home to Calgary. Again, I don't know if we're going to get the Stampeders who basically gifted a game to Ottawa, or the Stampeders who steamrolled the Bombers a week ago.
Well, the computer isn't a person, but if your computer model was a person, that person, i.e. computer model, must have been shocked at the Stamps pounding Winnipeg. In fact, I thought the final score made Winnipeg look better.
Yeah, the computer had Winnipeg as an obvious favorite in that one. The computer is making us, Don, a 4-point favorite home to Calgary on Friday night.
Okay.
as a Rider fan, and maybe it's just me, it's my years of following this club, I am nervous about the game. Don, if you look back the past 5 seasons from 2021 onwards, and you look at the first 4 games of each of those seasons, so that's 5 seasons, 4 games each, that's 20 games. The Riders are a collective 17-3 in the first 4 games of every season since the pandemic. Sadly,
right?
It seems right after that we hit the skid rails and the season goes in the toilet. I trust it's not the same this time, that we'll emerge victorious, but this is what always scares me, because I've seen this movie before. The Riders start strong and then something happens. They get on this skid. We end up losing some games. Having said that, this Calgary game, in my mind, is a pivotal game. Defeating them, we only played them twice. That'll give us obviously some opportunity of winning the tiebreaker against Calgary. That's why, again, I'm excited, but there's a lot of nervous energy right now as I think of the Friday night game in Mosaic.
Okay, so you've got Saskatchewan as a 4-point favorite. That sort of makes sense to me in some respects because they're at home. How does the computer look at the home versus the visitor? Does the computer give the home team a slight advantage depending on what their home record is, I suppose?
Yeah, and this is what scares me again. The computer gives each home team about 3.5 points. So in essence, Calgary and Saskatchewan on a neutral field is a pick'em. There's a very, very slight difference. So that's, again, maybe it's one of those situations where the home team with a loud and proud crowd on Friday could really propel the Riders forward. But Calgary, full marks again. They're 3-1. They've beaten Winnipeg. They had a situation obviously where they stubbed their toe against Ottawa. But hey, they're 3-1 for a reason. And they defeated Toronto in Toronto the same way we did. It's going to be a good match.
Now, in terms of what the computer is saying, I know it's so soon, but the computer right now, Saskatchewan and Hamilton, and it makes sense for Hamilton after their last game. I mean, they look like world beaters, did they not? And to walk into a TO like that, and I mean, Arbuckle was leading the league in passing going into that game, so you can't give the excuse that Chad Kelly wasn't playing. But the computer must have really give Hamilton a notch up when they put over 50 points on the board against Toronto.
The computer had Hamilton by 3 in that game, so a close game. But then Hamilton wins a game. It basically looked like it was the CFL from the 1980s, where it was back and forth with scoring and very little defense. Give it up for Hamilton. They defeated Montreal. They defeated Toronto. They've earned their stripes. And again, we played them already this year. We beat them. We get them once more at home, which should be okay. But Hamilton, to me, Hamilton and Calgary are the 2 teams that are surging right now from the computer's perspective.
And it makes sense when you think about, we don't know where Winnipeg's going or what's going to happen with Winnipeg, but 8 players leaving Winnipeg for Hamilton. It looks like it's starting to show perhaps on both teams.
Maybe it is, and I've been highly critical of Bo Levi Mitchell as the Hamilton quarterback, but last week he looked like the Calgary Bo, and if Bo can play like the Calgary Bo, then to me, in what I would call a weaker Eastern Division, let's face it, 10 wins is probably going to get you first place in the East. So if a team can get like that 10-8 record, earn home field advantage throughout the playoffs. To me, that would put them in a good spot for going into a Grey Cup game.
Right now, late August to mid-September this year, the Riders have a 4-game stretch. You've called it the gauntlet. Is that going to decide whether the Riders have a shot at first place?
I think so, Don. I would do a happy dance if the Riders went 2-2 in that 4-game stretch. So it's at Calgary. And again, I know usually at a Calgary game, the fans are roughly 50-50 because there's a lot of the Rider Nation will travel to that game, or else the expats like Jack Newman will be there supporting the green and white. Then we've got the back-to-back with Winnipeg, and it's hard for us to win in Winnipeg. We haven't done that since 2018. and then we're home to Montreal. So at Calgary, home to Winnipeg, at Winnipeg, home to Montreal. 4 tough games. Again, I'd be happy with 2-2. I'd be thrilled with 3-1 if we could maybe win the game in Calgary, because until we can beat Winnipeg and Manitoba, that's been a tough place for us to play the last 7 seasons.
Yeah, there's that magic about Mike O'Shea. You always think, okay, finally the Bombers aren't going to be as good, which at this point in time, they seem to be our number one rival. Although I think it's, over the decades, sometimes I think it's been Edmonton as Saskatchewan's rival in different decades. It's been Calgary, but it seems to be of late Winnipeg. But it just seems like you can't count out Mike O'Shea as the head coach of that team, can you? Because he just keeps rolling, it seems, other than the game in Calgary.
Yeah, it's like one of those Friday the 13th movies where you think Jason is dead, but then he basically emerges back up. And you're correct, Don. If you think back in the 70s, it was Saskatchewan, Edmonton. It was Lancaster versus Wilkinson, Lancaster versus Larry Highball. If you think of the mid-2000s, early 2010s, Saskatchewan and Calgary, and the games we played with them, especially when Henry played with the Stampeders. Now it's Saskatchewan, Winnipeg. The last 4 times that we've lost in the playoffs, 2018, 2019, 2021, 2024, who beat us? Winnipeg. Winnipeg has knocked us out the last 4 times we've been in the playoffs, and that's they are the first team in CFL history to knock us out in 4 consecutive playoff appearances.
Right, and if you go back to the 60s, it was Calgary. Calgary had, Terry Evans and Peter Lisk against Ronnie and George. Calgary was the team that we had to beat to the Grey Cup in those days. So it's sort of interesting but it's always a prairie team. It's always a prairie team, one way or another, that's our rival. It's never BC out in the left coast. And I don't know who the heck BC's rival is. Farhan Laji, I'll ask him on the next segment. Who's BC's main rival?
That's a good question, because BC, to me, I think you always look in the Labor Day weekend, which is like, to me, that's the high watermark of the regular season. You got Edmonton, Calgary, you got Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, you got Hamilton, Toronto, maybe Ottawa, Montreal. BC is like the misfit toy. It doesn't have a dance partner on Labor Day weekend. And think back, Don, you mentioned about the 1960s. Again, I hark back to my late father, who talked for years about George Reed versus Wayne Harris.
Yeah.
If you wanted to see best on best, that to me was one of the best, I would say the best running back in league history against one of the best linebackers in CFL history.
I agree totally. I remember one hit between the two of them that echoed through Taylor Field. Well, we've run out of time. Great job. Just love having you on, Keith, and you have a good evening. Sports Cage will continue in just a moment.